Hello, welcome to the massive open online course on ICT skills in education. Today we are dealing with the session on flipped classroom. A flipped classroom is an instructional strategy and a type of blended learning that reverses the traditional learning environment by delivering instructional content, often online, outside of the classroom. It moves activities, including those that may have traditionally been considered homework, into the classroom. In a flipped classroom, students watch online lectures, collaborate in online discussions, or carry out research at home while engaging in concepts in the classroom with the guidance of a mentor. In the traditional model of classroom instruction, the teacher is typically the central focus of a lesson and the primary disseminator of information during the class period. The teacher responds to questions while students defer directly to the teacher for guidance and feedback. In a classroom with a traditional style of instruction, individual lessons may be focused on an explanation of content utilizing a lecture style. Student engagement in the traditional model may be limited to activities in which students work independently or in small groups on an application task designed by the teacher. Class discussions are typically centered on the teacher who controls the flow of the conversation. Typically, this pattern of teaching also involves giving students the task of reading from a textbook or practicing a concept by working on a problem set, for example, outside school. The flipped classroom intentionally shifts instruction to a learner-centered model in which class time explores topics in greater depth and creates meaningful learning opportunities, while educational technologies such as online videos are used to deliver content outside of the classroom. In a flipped classroom, content delivery may take a variety of forms. Often, video lessons prepared by the teacher of third parties are used to deliver content, although online collaborative discussions, digital research, and text readings may be used. It has been shown that the ideal length of the video lesson to be is 8 to 12 minutes. Flipped classrooms also redefine in-class activities. In-class lessons accompanying flipped classroom may include activity learning or more traditional homework problems, among other practices to engage students in the content. Class activities vary but may include using math manipulative and emerging mathematical technologies, in-depth laboratory experiments, original document analysis, debate or speech presentation, current event discussions, peer reviewing, project-based learning, and skill development or concept practice. Because these types of active learning allow for highly differentiated instruction, more time can be spent in class on higher order thinking skills such as problem finding, collaboration, design, and problem solving as students tackle difficult problems, work in groups, research, and construct knowledge with the help of their teacher and peers. A teacher's interaction with students in a flipped classroom can be more personalized and less didactic, and students are actively involved in knowledge acquisition and construction as they participate in and evaluate their learning. History of flipped classroom. In 1993, Alison King published From Sage on the Stage to Guide on the Side, in which she focuses on the importance of the use of class time for the construction of meaning rather than information transmission. While not directly illustrating the concept of flipping a classroom, King's work is often cited as an impetus for an inversion to allow for the educational space for active learning. Harvard professor Eric Mazur played a significant role in the development of concepts influencing flipped teaching through the development of an instructional strategy he called peer instruction. Mazur published a book in 1997 outlining the strategy entitled Peer Instruction, a User's Manual. He found that his approach, which moved information transfer out of the classroom and information assimilation into the classroom, allowed him to coach students in their learning instead of lecture. Leitch, Plath and Treglia published a paper entitled Inverting the Classroom, a Gateway to Creating an Inclusive Learning Environment in 2000, which discusses their research on flipped classrooms at the college level. In their research focusing on two college economics courses, Leitch, Plath and Treglia assert that one can leverage the class time that becomes available from the inversion of the classroom to meet the needs of students with a wide variety of learning styles. The University of Wisconsin-Madison deployed software to replace lectures in large lecture-based computer science courses with streaming video of the lecture and coordinated slides. In the late 1990s, J. Wesley Baker was experimenting with these same ideas at Cedarville University. He presented a paper discussing what he termed the classroom flip at an education conference in the year 2000, and what may be the first published mention of the word flip associated with this model of teaching and learning. Kaw and Hess published a paper in 2007 to compare the effectiveness of 4 instructional modalities for a single topic of science, technology, engineering and math STEM: traditional lecture, blended, web-based self-study and flipped. Statistical analysis of the assessment data indicated that the second modality, in which web-based modules for instruction were used during face-to-face lecture delivery mode, resulted in higher levels of student performance and satisfaction. Perhaps the most recognizable contributor to the flipped classroom is Salman Khan. In 2007, Khan began recording videos at the request of a younger cousin he was tutoring, because she felt that recorded lessons would let her skip segments she had mastered and replay parts that were troubling her. Salman Khan founded Khan Academy, khanacademy.org, based on this model. For some, Khan Academy has become synonymous with the flipped classroom. However, these videos are only one form of the flipped classroom strategy. The Wisconsin Collaboratory for Enhanced Learning has built 2 centers to focus on flipped and blended learning. The classroom structure houses technology and collaboration-friendly learning spaces and emphasizes for those involved in the program is placed on individualized learning through non-traditional teaching strategies such as flipped classroom. Flipped learning, uses and benefits. Flipped learning has not been rigorously evaluated as a pedagogy in higher education, but case studies are emerging in ever greater numbers which document measurable improvements in student and teacher motivation, increased attendance in class and better grades as a result of using the flipped approach. At Vanderbilt University in the US, measurable improvements in test scores were recorded when a section of a large enrollment physics class was flipped in 2011. In 2012-13, the University of Queensland, Australia, successfully implemented large-scale flipped learning to over 1,000 students across a range of disciplines. The university is now leading a global partnership of universities in an initiative to better understand how engineering education might be redesigned using the flipped learning model, and how the spread and adoption of best practice in flipped learning could be accelerated. In the UK, the University of Manchester School of Social Sciences and Computer Science have experimented with flipping the tutorial by providing a video to watch before the tutorial and using tutorial time for small group work, which includes problem-based learning activities. Evaluation of the system suggests general improvement in student engagement and highlights the logistical challenges in implementing small group working within large cohorts. Universities and schools in the US were early adopters of the flipped model, and the concept has gained traction in the UK. Indeed, Horizon Scanning reports forecast flipped learning as an innovative pedagogy with the potential for high impact in the higher education sector in the medium term, 2 to 5 years. By providing students with the material to gain a basic level of knowledge and understanding before class, classroom time can be used to deepen learning and develop higher level cognitive skills. One of the core objectives of flipped learning is to move students away from passive learning and towards active learning, where students engage in collaborative activity, peer learning, and problem-based learning. Within this context, the role of the teacher shifts towards that of facilitator and coach by empowering students to take control of their own learning. The use of technology further enriches the flipped learning process and promotes skills that are essential for the 21st century learning. Example, digital literacy. Flipped mastery. In traditional schools, each topic in class receives a fixed amount of time for all students. Flipped mastery classrooms apply a mastery learning model that requires each student to master a topic before moving to the next one. Mastery learning was briefly popular in the 1920s and was revived by Benjamin Bloom in 1968. While it is difficult to implement in large traditional classrooms, it has shown dramatic success in improving student learning. The mastery model allows teachers to provide the materials, tools, and support for learning while students set goals and manage their time. Mastery rewards students for displaying competence. Students who initially turn in shoddy work must correct it before moving on. Before flipping, mastery learning was impractical in most schools. It was not possible to give different lectures for different groups of students. Testing was also impractical because fast learning students could reveal the test to those who followed. In a flipped mastery classroom, students view each lecture and work on each exercise or project when they have mastered the precursors. Tim Kelly adopted flipped mastery with his colleagues Corey Sullivan and Mike Brust. Sullivan estimated that 40 to 60 hours of work outside school for each of 12 units per course were required the first year. Flipped mastery eliminates two other out-of-the-class routines: daily lesson planning and grading papers. The latter happens in class and in person. Replacing lectures with group and individual activities increase in-class activity. Each student has something to do throughout the class. In some classes, students choose how to demonstrate mastery testing, writing, speaking, debating, and even designing a related game. Learning management systems such as Moodle provides way to manage the testing process. They create a different test for each student from a pool of questions. Advocates claim that its efficiency allows more students to do a year's work in much less time. Advanced students work on independent projects, while slower learners get more personalized instruction. Some students might not get through the year's material, but demonstrated competence on the parts they did complete. Students' perceptions. Students may be more likely to favor the flipped classroom approach once they have taken the time to personally participate in the specific type of learning course. In a prior pharmaceutics course, for instance, a mere 34.6% of the 19 students initially preferred the flipped classroom setting. After all of the students had participated in the pharmaceutical flipped classroom course, the number of those favoring this method of learning increased significantly, reaching a total of 89.5% individuals. Individuals interested in a more problem-solving, hands-on form of learning are more likely to benefit from flipped classrooms, as it sways away from a traditional lecture learning style. Students may initially have certain doubts or fears regarding the use of flipped classroom, including the fear of having to teach oneself, as in having a lack of proper guidance from a designated instructor, leading to greater pressure on the students to study the content rigorously in order to perform well in the course. Obtaining a greater amount of academic work in order to achieve success within the course as a result of minimal guidance from an instructor. The fear of obtaining a greater sense of confusion on topics discussed, which may correlate to the heavy focus on group discussion and problem-solving activities that flipped classroom encourages. Flipped classroom is composed of various components such as video collections, PowerPoints, student discussion, teacher-student online communication, etc. It has been determined through several conducted experiments that certain aspects of the flipped classroom approach are more beneficial to students than others. For instance, in a study conducted on the feedback received from students who had participated in a flipped classroom teaching module for college English reading, the following results were derived. 92.59% of the students ultimately accepted the flipped classroom teaching module in general. 59.26% of the students accepted the video form of teaching module essentially provided as a resource for the course. 100% of the students believed that the learning guide link provided in the teaching module was necessary for performing well in the course. From these specific statistics, it can be determined that students felt that their experience with the flipped classroom was greatly benefited by certain aspects of the course, while other portions of the module may have been unnecessary or insignificant to their learning. Now, benefits. There are various benefits attributed to the idea of utilizing the flipped classroom approach, some including flipped classroom's approach at including all forms of learning, that is oral, visual, listening, hands-on, problem-solving, etc. Rather than learning in a traditional classroom setting, flipped classroom uses a more application-based approach for students, that is hands-on and problem-solving activities. The accessibility of flipped classroom is extremely convenient, especially for students that would face difficulties in traveling to the physical classroom. Such students would still have the foundational information of the course at hand via online. Communication is greatly emphasized in a flipped classroom setting, essentially referring to student-student and student-teacher interactions. Flipped classroom utilizes a student-centered teaching model in order to ensure that the course is primarily aimed at contributing to the student's overall success in obtaining a proper, effective education. Another benefit is it essentially avoids the overarching idea of cramming for exams and forgetting the information post-examination, as it encourages students to understand the underlying rationale behind the information being provided to them. Students must account for the responsibilities given to them in regards to learning the foundational information provided, as their personal work and contribution will be reflected in the grade that they receive at the end of the course. This will in turn make them better prepared for future, more difficult courses. Now, let's move on to criticisms of the flipped classroom. Of course, it's not that simple, and there are pros and cons of a flipped classroom. As a learning model, criticisms include reduced opportunity for self-directed critical thinking, decentering the role of the student, encouraging a lecture-driven march through curriculum, and in general simply streamlining an already industrialized approach to learning. And just like in a regular classroom, success depends greatly on the quality of the teacher, the clarity of communication, and the quality of given curriculum, assessment, and instruction. Further, equity is still a major issue, and it doesn't address the dated approach more educational systems take to curriculum. So, there's that. Critics argue the flipped classroom model has some consequences for both students and teachers. For students, there exists a digital divide. Not all families are from the same socio-economic background, and thus access to computers or video viewing technology outside the school environment is not possible for all students. This model of instruction may put undue pressure on some families as they attempt to gain access to videos outside of school hours. Additionally, some students may struggle due to their developing personal responsibility. In a self-directed home learning environment, students who are not at the developmental stage required to keep on task with independent learning may fall rapidly behind their peers. Others argue that flipped classroom leads to increased computer time in an era where adolescents already spend too much time in front of computer screens. Inverted models that rely on computerized videos do contribute to this challenge, particularly if videos are long. Additionally, flipped classrooms that rely on videos to deliver instruction suffer some of the same challenges as traditional classrooms. Students may not learn the best by listening to a lecture, and watching instructional videos at home is still representative of a more traditional form of teaching. Critics argue a constructivist approach would be more beneficial. Teachers may find challenges with this model as well. Increased preparation time is initially likely needed, as creating high-quality videos requires teachers to contribute significant time and effort outside of regular teaching responsibilities. Additional funding may also be required to procure training for teachers to navigate computer technologies involved in the successful implementation of the inverted model. The potential performance increase the flipped classrooms varies greatly on classroom by classroom basis. The potential benefits may be affected by the method of conducting the classroom and the level of intensity of the course. Currently, the amount of research available is not enough to create rigorous practical guidelines for all teachers to use. Therefore, some teachers may conduct the flipped classroom more effectively than others. In addition, the level of intensity of the course may also play a crucial role in the efficacy of the flipped model. Researchers often witness a more defined performance increase in school education as opposed to higher education. But new thinking about how students learn is still thinking all the same, that is, the students do homework at school. Let us now summarize what we have discussed so far. A flipped classroom is one where students are introduced to content at home and practice working through it at school. In this blended learning approach, face-to-face interaction is mixed with independent study via technology. Students watch pre-recorded videos at home, then come to school to do the homework armed with questions and at least some background knowledge. The concept behind the flipped classroom is rethink when students have access to the resources they need the most. If the problem is that students need help doing the work rather than being introduced to the new thinking behind the work, then the solution the flipped classroom takes is to reverse that pattern. This doubles student access to teachers, once with the videos at home and again in the classroom, increasing the opportunity for personalization and more precise guiding of learning. In the flipped classroom model, students practice under the guidance of the teacher while accessing content on their own. A side benefit is that teachers can record lectures that emphasize critical ideas, power standards, and even the pace of a given curriculum map. It also has the side benefit of allowing students to pause, rewind, Google terms, rewatch, etc., as well as creating a ready-made library for student review, makeup work, etc. Thank you for watching today's program. Hope today's session was enriching. Goodbye.